is this working? Oh god. Wait.
I fucked up, so I gotta fix this. Also, my cord's getting stuck. My actual history class. There we go. Bam. Perfect. All right. Shh. Shh.
I'm trying. Be quiet, or I'll beat you with this paintbrush. Oh gosh, my mic's shaking. Hold on. I need to tighten the bolts. There we go. Oh gosh. Maybe you might like the towel better. Oh, it muted my mic. You bastard. The towel muted my mic. I didn't know it could do that. I think the hands sound better. I tried doing this yesterday. I think I might turn up the volume a bit. There you go. What if I do it all the way? Usually whenever I'm in class, I like to bite my nails. It's a very bad habit that I have. And, my fingernails are kind of getting caught on the cloth. And that's why it sounds very scratchy, I guess. It's not very smooth. But I think it sounds good. Oh, fuck. It's pulling my nails. Right, I think I might. Hopefully it doesn't mute my mic again. Alright, hold on. There we go. Ah, my head is itchy. Hey! use my bird. What? What's wrong?
What?
Sorry. She just wants the attention. Sorry. Oh my gosh. My nose. Everything's going wrong right now. I'm looking at the bag of lifesavers that I have on my bed. I kinda want some. Alright. Alright, I guess I should go ahead and begin with the stream. Alright. So, the whole purpose of this stream is an excuse to be able to record. Well, not record, but for me to study. I have an exam tomorrow, and I don't feel like studying on my own. Thus, I will stream it and study. Because you might be struggling to study. And I know I am. And gaming can't always provide the answers that I need. Although it can be slightly relaxing. Sometimes it's not the best option to do instead of actually studying. I feel like I'm doing a good job. I would use my mouse to click on stuff and like my keyboard, but they were so fucking loud. But yes, this stream is essentially an excuse to study, I guess. And so, I have an exam tomorrow in class around 9 in the morning. Please pray for me. I'm gonna have to research, or not research, but write down what I've learned and stuff like that. Typical history things, you know. It's not always about dates and names. But I digress. Anyways, let's get into it because I actually want to finish studying so that way I can play. Anyways, the class that we are going to be studying for is History 4642, Section 001, War in American Society, Fall of 2025. Basically, this class goes over American society. Oh my gosh, I can't. The camera is mirrored. It throws me off. Basically, it goes over American society during times of war. War in American society. You can hear that. Oh my gosh. She's going nuts. American society. If you were here last time, I've changed my lighting placement so it looks better. But I digress. Let's get to studying. Oh fuck. a shitload of notes. Oh gosh. How many pages is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pages? Seven pages worth of studying. Fuck. I don't want to do this. Oh gosh. Alright. Where do I begin? I had to get my phone, sorry. Hold on. Alright. I know you're here, Joseph. Check your DM.
My foot keeps popping. Jesus Christ. Should have put this on here.
It muted my mic again, this fucking towel. This is how much I procrastinate. I haven't even started. Alright. Okay, actually, that's.
But fuck. I keep throwing my phone. I'm sorry.
I swear I'm locked in. Oh gosh. Alright, let's lock in. I don't know why I have to tell. The towel keeps muting the mic, so I'm gonna take it off. Alright. We're gonna start with home front and meaning. Concepts of military history. A major American war. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, also known as the 7 Years' War. Wait, hold on, I think I have a better idea. What if I do this? Hold on, I'm gonna mute myself because it's gonna be very loud. Oh, there we go. Right, now it's flipped. Is there a way I can hold on? I'm still trying to figure this out. Get out of here. Oh gosh, what is this? Wait, hold on, I think I can. There we go. And then I can still read it. I don't want to show the screen because that's a little distracting. Don't mind my AirPod for some reason. Alright. I guess that's fine. Let me zoom in. Oh gosh, that's too much. I know you guys can't see what I'm doing. I have to move it over. There you go. Uh-oh. What did I do? Alright. This is gonna be much easier for you guys to, I guess, see. I don't know why it's not focusing. But I guess we're gonna go ahead and start. So, here we have home fronts and meaning. Concept of military history. Major American wars such as the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Year War, basically bankrupted the British, set up the American Revolution. From this French and Indian War basically came the Proclamation Line of 1763. The Proclamation Line is essentially a line where people cannot move past a certain geographical location. I'm gonna fix my camera because it's blurry. I'm sorry about that. Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. Wait, properties, there we go. Oh, there we go. Wait, yeah. Focus. Oh, there we go. Wait, hold on, that's very weird. There we go, I'll put it to auto. There we go. So, the Proclamation Line of 1763 was basically the British telling the colonies that they cannot move past or west of the Appalachian Mountains. You can see here I wrote, can't move east past. Oh gosh. Wait. I wrote this wrong. This is supposed to say west. Let me correct that. I swear I know what I'm doing. What is this? Why are you on there? Okay. Let me bring my puppy in here. We can have a companion. Oh, you can barely see him. I guess I'll keep him. Alright. Now, the second major war, American War, is the American Revolution, where basically not all American citizens were on board. With the idea of revolution. What if I do that? It's still blurry. Okay, never mind. Alright, I'll just stick with this. Alright. The War of 1812, also known as the Forgotten War, basically embarrassed the American people due to the British burning federal buildings. The only building that was left standing was the U.S. Patent Office. That was the only unburnt building. The White House was torched. Citizens were confused by cause of war. Sailor impressment, trade, native uprising blamed on Great Britain, ended the Federalist Party because of anti-war. So during the War of 1812, citizens of the American colonies, or now the new United States of America, were essentially confused on why the War of 1812 even began in the first place. So the citizens would wonder, why are they even in this war? Sailor impressment, one thing we commonly know, caused the war, with American sailors overseas being forced into British ships, into British labor. Now, trading with France, with other nations, the British did not like that. Thus, they would essentially stop cargo and prevent trade. Native uprising blamed on Great Britain. Great Britain would be blamed for causing native uprisings. The Federalist Party came to an end during this era. Before, it used to be the Democratic Republican Party. I believe the Whigs and the Federalist Party. But the Federalist Party would end after the War of 1812 due to their Civil War. The Civil War from 1861 to 1865 is another major American war. Here, military draft was introduced. Emancipation through war was also introduced for African American soldiers. And also, well, not just African American soldiers, but essentially people of color. The Spanish-American War, also known as the Splendid Little War, was the first time Americans would show its power status, with President Theodore Roosevelt and his big stick policy, essentially showing military might, would go and kick the Spanish's ass in this war, which would last, I believe, 3 months. This would show America as a world power, but in reality, it was we commonly know that to be during the First World War. World War I, also known as the Great War, or the war to end all wars. Government cracked down on Americans with laws such as the Espionage Act, as well as I forgot the other one, but we'll cover it in a little bit. Government had to teach Americans of United States system. I don't know what that means. Anyways, World War II. Government less strict. So during the Second World War, unlike the government during the First World War, would basically be lenient on the American citizens. Oh, I remember now. During the First World War, the government basically had to show its Americans that the US system could basically function, unlike all these other wars, where it was all over the place. They had to unify the government, basically, and would essentially teach the Americans that their system works. The Korean War and Vietnam would bring the Red Scare. Major changes. Standing armies / mobilization. Standing armies enlisted men, not mobilized. So basically, America, during essentially all of its wars, would keep next to no standing army, fearing an uprising or the causes that an army could bring. So, they would not allow a standing army. Yeah, I wrote it here. U.S. Americans didn't want a standing army and wanted to rely on state militia. Basically, especially during the colonial era, colonists believed that an army was unnecessary as it resembled too close to foreign powers and believed that their state, whichever state it may be, but that their own state could provide militia power sufficient enough as a state army. Support, propaganda, 4-Minute Men, pamphlet newspapers, and bonds. So, propaganda would go up a lot during this First World War, and is where most of our American propaganda would rise up. Also, during the First World War, 4-Minute Men, basically these men were essentially speakers who would give a speech to the people in the public for 4 minutes regarding why they should go to war, or basically ideas such as propaganda. Pamphlets and newspapers were very good ways that general audiences could receive information regarding propaganda. Bonds were introduced, I believe, during the Civil War. During the American Revolution. I guess this is whenever you first saw bonds introduced. But they wouldn't really go up until, I believe, the Civil War, but are most commonly referred with World War I and World War II, where Americans would essentially sacrifice some money and would basically pay, if willing, it's an option. They can basically donate and potentially receive some money back after the war. Dissent. Racial conflicts. Racial segregation had been occurring in the army from colonial, Civil War, War of 1812, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, up to the Korean War, as well as Vietnam. Basically, segregation occurred in the military until desegregation occurred in the Korean War. Sacrifice of goods. Technology. Americans believed that a heavy reliance on technology would equal to less American casualties. Casualties refer to a sum of both injury, missing in action, and killed soldiers. Conclusion. America would learn professionalism, I would also receive a standing army. The Armenian Indian Wars. Introduction assessment. Positive experience with Indians, like Thanksgiving and trading, would occur. These are positive assets that would come from interacting with Indians. I accidentally wrote amendments here. That's why I scribbled it out. Negative experiences. Mostly, colonists and Americans believe that Indians were savages. Noble savage and savage of Iroquois. Stereotypes of Indians in their purest form. Stereotypes of Indians would basically arise of two forms of Indians. The first form is more humane, where a savage could basically be assimilated into the white world of colonial America. The second form is of more or less that savages have no hope, and that they were always going to be inhuman. Indian views. Some Indians felt sympathy for the colonists. Oh shit, where's it at? There it is. For the colonists. Extremes. New England, Thanksgiving 1620. Indians help settlers cultivate food and celebrate the harvest with a feast, is what we Americans come to know as Thanksgiving. The Parakeet War of 1636 to 1637 used to instill fear on Indians. This instillment would fail. Hold on. I'm going to reset something. I'm going to try something. I wonder if oh shit, what did I do? Okay, that didn't work. I'm sorry. It's not working for some reason. won't change anything. The barricades, the barricade were upset with large arrival of English slash European settlers because it wasn't just British. Natives tried to spread rumors and instill fear upon the colonists. The Burgate villages was burnt and massacred by colonists, and I don't know what that says. I believe I tried to write collaboration, but I misspelled it terribly. Cool. Operation. It's fine. I can understand my own notes. Oh, my apologies. So the Parakeet War, the Indians basically tried to scare off the colonists. This would backfire extremely hard for the for the Indians. And the Paraquat would be massacred. King Philip's War of 1675 to 1676. Metacom, known as King Philip, was chief of the Wampanoag, who basically led an attack on the colonial state of Massachusetts. Eventually, he will be killed. Native tribes allied, but are still major rivals. So, Indians would essentially try to fight off colonists together. Similarly, the colonists in not each state, but in the area that was being attacked, would unite and basically fight back against King Philip and the other tribes that joined in. Depopulation. The Chesapeake. Pocahontas, an Indian woman who saves a colonist from execution. I believe it was John Smith that she saves from being executed by Pocahontas's tribe. Powhatan. When killed, Virginia celebrates. I'm not even going to try to say that. Bacon's Rebellion. Nathaniel Bacon was an indentured servant. Once freed, he looked for land and tries to remove natives. And governor. Colonist Bacon versus colonist Berkeley versus colonist Bacon versus Indian. This man was basically going up against a whole colony versus a tribe against his own, I guess, uprising. Eventually, over time, eventually, Indians would begin to negotiate with Americans instead of choosing violence. The blade-off system. The blade-off system is basically when tribes and colonists would trade and basically not talk about the whole violence that had occurred in their history. Accommodations eventually fit into society-ish. Eventually, native tribes would be assimilated into the colonial history, or I guess the colonial field, and basically they would sort of fit in, but their cultural difference would make them stand out. Assessment. Highlight of positive from Indian interaction. Alright, moving on. Colonial America at war. British colonial America. Shit, I can read, I swear. British colonial war. The King William's War. Basically, the French, the British, and the Indians fight for America. This would occur in 1689 to 1697. That's crazy. Colonists, as we know, the Americans, would fight against the French and Indians. Queen Anne's War, 1702 to 1713. French, British, and sometimes the Spanish would fight. Colonists asked for more British to fight off the Spanish, the British. Wait, excuse me, no. Colonists would ask the British to fight off the French natives and the Spanish. When the war ended, this left tensions between the British and the colonists due to their unwillingness to provide support. I wrote here, colonists felt betrayed by the lack of captured territories. The Treaty of Utrecht, 1713. King George's War of 1739 to 1748. French versus British. Colonial mistrust against the British. Oh my gosh, this camera keeps going out of focus and I hate it. I'm sorry about that. Colonial mistrust against the British. once again didn't lead colonists in the war. So similarly to Queen Anne's War, the colonists who are also fighting would be unled basically by the British military, and their lack of support would basically cause even more tensions in colonial America. Service, colonial militia, 1750s, citizen soldiers. I don't know why it's so damn blurry. I might try moving it somewhere. Okay. I'm sorry if you can't see. I'm sorry about my bird in the background. She's just going crazy. Okay. Mandate of militia in colonies. Eventually, exclusion of certain persons. Example, Benjamin Church believed line fighting was foolish. So certain people would be excluded from fighting in the militia of state militia. And I guess this would essentially be, the militia would be, I guess you could call it the standing army. But in reality, historically, they would not be considered a standing army, as they literally aren't together until a conflict occurs. So, and they aren't properly organized as a standing army. Social institutions, not respected by the crown. They aren't professional soldiers. The colonial militia would not be respected by the colonial militia would not be respected by British authority, viewing them as inferior to the redcoats. The French and Indian War, 7 Years' War. Origins: French, British, and Indians and Spanish. Great Britain soldiers remained after the war. So, after the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, redcoats would remain in colonial America to help provide support for any future wars that may occur after the French and Indian War. Albany Congress. What the hell is that? I just got a loud notification. Am I still streaming? My bird is sneezing in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay. I'm sorry for telling your business. Yes. Okay, I think it's still working. Yeah, I think it's working. 7 colonies met to discuss defense and native matters. Basically, 7 out of the 13 colonies would meet, I believe, in Pennsylvania to discuss occurring matters regarding the British Army. Oh my gosh. Are you okay?
You're like.
This bird's really tripping me up, sorry. Basically, they would talk about Great Britain not basically supporting them. They would talk about Great Britain not supporting them in the war. They would also talk about native matters regarding natives attacking. I'm trying to record a video. What?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I guess she's getting a little quirky. Alright. During the French and Indian War, a famous rising captain. Well, I guess during this war he wouldn't be famous, but a famous military man would arise. George Washington. George Washington believed that the colonial militia needed proper training. Impact. The French are removed from Canada after the French and Indian War. The French would be removed from Canada. Thus, the Proclamation Line of 1763 would also be emplaced by the by the British Crown. British don't want colonists past the border because it upset. This proclamation line would cause an upset in the colonies, basically wanting to go past and expand. They would basically prevent this idea of manifest destiny, which would be pent up for a while. As I mentioned before, British would leave a standing army. The colonists viewed it as an outcry. As I mentioned before, the colonists would not want a standing army, whether it be colonial or British. That's kind of funny when you think about them wanting a... Oh my gosh. Sorry.
That bird's going crazy.
Would you like to see her? She's having fun. Oh yeah, I'm upside down, I forgot. She's over there. Oh shit, it's mirrored. Fuck. She's right there. Anyways. Oh gosh. There you go. Now it's focused. Alright. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh, it's funny because the colonies would essentially want a British to lead them in battle and to have British support during these crises. But afterwards, they wanted to shove them out. These wars would cause massive tax debts for the British, which they would implement tax acts such as the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, and the Glass Act. Colonists are left out of British Parliament. They have no voice. The American Revolutionary War Society. A unique experience. Americans feel more American than British. Loyalty comes and goes. Very personal to each colonist. I am so sorry about my bird. Basically, hold on. Let me get some Dr. Pepper, because I'm thirsty. Alright, there we go. So, basically, colonists are like 3 generations. Or most Americans would be, I guess, 3 generations old. So, they would be born on American soil. So most didn't really feel British. For an example, if a person who is born in, I guess, Russia moves to England and they have a son in England and their son has a son, their son's son, their grandson would feel more British than he would Russian. I hope that makes sense. War hopes. The British believed they are the best armed force in the war during the American Revolution. They don't believe that loyalty disputes into patriots. They believed that loyalty isn't derived from patriotism of Americans wanting to be Americans. They believe that as a form of rebellion. Thus, the British Army, oh my gosh, why do I keep saying that? The British Army, the British Army will show its dominance. Loyalists will uprise and fight against the rebels. The colonists viewed the war hopes as a personal feeling of fighting for their homeland. Citizen soldiers / militia believed in just cause. Home fronts, civilians. Almost all lives will be affected by the American Revolution in America. British colonists will be treated less as lesser people than British soldiers. Sacrifices, hardship, and everyday life. Costs would skyrocket during the American Revolution and would cause limited supplies. Loyalists. When war tides changed, loyalists are ousted, sometimes tarred and feathered, houses burned, and evicted or robbed. After what battle is it? Oh my gosh, I don't remember. Oh my gosh, I don't remember. What battle is it? Hold on, let me look it up. Oh, yes. The Battle of Saratoga would cause the tide of war to change, which would allow for Ben Franklin and John Adams in France to basically negotiate with King Louis the 15th. No, excuse me, the 16th. Women participated in war by boycotting British supplies. They would supply clothes. They would be nurses, cooks, and spies. Incredible work. African Americans. There were Lord Dunmore loyalists and Patriot loyalists. Some in the North, given the chance to serve. South don't want them to serve. So, basically, oh gosh, it's out of focus. I don't know why it does that. Basically, Lord Dunmore, loyalists. Lord Dunmore is a British. I don't know what he is, but he's British. This man would write a proclamation before leaving colonial America regarding enslaved people to uprise against their master, to serve the British crown would be guaranteed freedom in the British captured territories. Those are known as Lord Dunmore loyalists. Patriot loyalists often depend on geographical location. If a African American was from the North, they were more more than likely given the opportunity to serve in the colonial militia, such as the Rhode Island Regiment and the Connecticut Regiment. I believe also the Massachusetts, but I believe that isn't until the Civil War. By fate, Loyalist Lord Dunmore Loyalist returned to British in shame. After the American Revolution, those slaves who uprised against the British colonies would essentially return back with the Redcoats. Do not face glory, but to be outcasted. But they were given their individual rights. But they would be shamed for their actions in Great Britain. Patriots returned some freed slaves. Oh, excuse me, I said that wrong. Some patriots, African American patriots, would return back to slavery. Some others would be freed by their actions. Indians would fight for the British, believing that the British could provide them the better opportunity of returning their land. Outcome: the American colonists would basically be the greatest superpower at the time. Washington would return to civil life. Early national period. Problems of demobilization. The Standing Army fear. They believed that they did not need a mimic of the British Army, but instead would trust the colonial militia, or I believe at this point the state militia. Soldiers were also very unhappy being in a standing army, in a militia, because they just want to go home. The Quasi-War Alliance. Washington/Adams didn't want a treaty with a foreign nation. Diplomatic failures. John Adams, during his presidency, would slash the Navy, basically getting rid of the Navy to a small few amount of boats. And overall, his presidency would be rough. The XYZ affair. John Adams sent 3 ambassadors to France. Aliens and Sedition Act. The Aliens and Sedition Act would rise up and basically oust anybody who is against the newly formed United States of America. Virginia's Kentucky Resolution basically stated by James because they're even right to. This resolution would cause problems later on during the Civil War, which would be one of the leading causes to the Civil War, as they believed it was the right of the state to separate if it chose to. Expansion policies, reorganization concept. Jefferson would undo all of Adams's fuck-ups. Basically, Thomas Jefferson would undo anything and everything that John Adams did. Instead of slashing the Navy, Jefferson would slash the Army to make a more elite army. Jefferson would also create West Point, a famous military school that is still around today. A fun fact, West Point could have probably been named Arnold after Benedict Arnold if Arnold had died in battle. West Point. Continuing off of West Point. Jefferson would basically create this school to integrate Democratic Republican officers into the Army. These Establishment Acts excuse me. I'm a little tired. Westward expansion. Westward expansion came after the American Colonial War, as the proclamation line was no longer necessary. From this would come the Louisiana Purchase, where Thomas Jefferson would purchase land from Napoleon Bonaparte. During this time period, Napoleon Bonaparte would be fighting what is known as the Napoleonic Wars. Thus, he would be willing to give up his entire territory to supply his army in Europe. Jefferson would send Pike and Lewis and Clark to explore these new territories. As we know, Pike would go south to Texas and through Louisiana and that general area. Lewis and Clark, on the other hand, would go up the Mississippi River and then go left, westward, all the way until they hit ocean. The War of 1812 was caused by impressment of U.S. sailors. The Duquesne and Prophet tried to join tribes together. Native and British alliance. Warhawks. The Dugamesh, which is the natives, and the province, which is the British, would try to ally during this war against the newly founded America. Warhawks, also known as Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, believed impressment in natives were an act of war. They would try to push for war. Impact. This would cause I'm sorry, I have to read ahead so I know what I'm talking about. Basically, during the War of 1812, these nations, the United States, was unprepared for war and would basically bring themselves into debt, which they would need a national bank to basically get out of this debt. In steps Hamilton, who basically would push for a national bank to be set up. But Hamilton would be killed in a duel with Aaron Burr over some disputes regarding Burr's legacy, I guess, or his career. The Hanford Convention. Federalists wanted to end the war. They wanted to add to the Constitution no presidents from the state. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, I believe James Monroe, or John, yeah, after basically Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, the Federalists would basically want to add that after a president is elected, a president after him cannot be from the same state. For an example, Thomas Jefferson was from Virginia, and James Madison was also from Virginia. Given that these are southern states, they would impose what they believe to be the right thing, their state ideals. Thus, the Federalists would propose in the Hanford Convention this idea: nationalhood. Nationalhood would surge after 1850. After the War of 1812, a famous song that we all know would arise: the Star-Spangled Banner. I actually missed this class and had to go to the professor to ask what this lesson was about. So, I'm sorry about my vagueness in this, I guess, this category. destiny. Origins, as I said, it and after the Indian are due to colonists basically trying to move past the Appalachian Mountains during and before the French and Indian War. This would cause Great Britain to introduce the Proclamation Line of 1763. Thus, would bend up the colonists to one side of colonial or the United States. This would build up and build up and build up and build up of colonists basically wanting to go past the mountains. They believed that they wanted their country to grow. My professor wrote here in blue. These are some of the things he wrote in here for me. I went to his office and asked him the things, and he grabbed my journal after I had written down what he had told me. And he was like, "You forgot these things." And so he wrote on my journal. So, romantic nationalism. Basically, the colonists were always thinking about expanding and manifest destiny. So the same way you think of a lover, the colonists, or the Americans, were now thinking of this beautiful land just waiting to be picked. Applications. War against natives and natives. Oh, sorry, native Mexicans. Okay. So during this time, during the Mexican-American War, would be an example of manifest destiny, as Americans would basically fight off natives and Mexico over these territories. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. I got hiccups all of a sudden. The expansion of America moving westward. Great Britain and USA. I believe this is not the War of 1812. It is another war. It is before this. I believe this is during the Mexican-American War, where basically British would basically be negotiated out of basically taking over colonial or America, and Mexico would basically relinquish Texas and California through war. Or, well, California, I guess. Texas would be annexed into America. The Mexican War origins. Manifest destiny led to the Mexican War. Basically, mobilization. Southerners cared about the Mexican-American War, and Northerners really couldn't give a damn about territories or anything south of the United States. These help promote the idea of manifest destiny. Opposition. President Santa Anna of Mexico would provide a big opposition to this idea of manifest destiny. Basically, a good example would be of Texas, when General Santa Anna, or President Santa Anna, or Commander, whichever word you prefer, would basically come to Texas to restore order himself, as Texas was growing in the time period of the 17th century, and thus was beginning to show nationalism of other countries such as America. Due to Stephen F. Austin and the land giveaway that they've done, Santa Anna would basically try to establish order in removing this idea of manifest destiny. New heroes from the Mexican-American War. President Zachary Taylor would emerge, and so will Winfield Scott. I wish I could tell you more about these gentlemen, but I have absolutely no clue what they did during the war, which is, I should probably write down and figure out what they did in case I am tested on that tomorrow. So give me a second as I pull it up. I would actually like to tell you guys what they did. Zachary Taylor was the 12th U.S. president. That's interesting. Well, I knew that, but I want to know what his significance was during that. Zachary Taylor was a key American general during the... My apologies for that car in the background. Alright, we can write down key American general. Was a key American general during the Mexican War, leading forces to significant victories at Palo Alto, Monterrey, and Buena Vista, which made him a national hero and a presidential candidate. His military success in northern Mexico, though overshadowed by General Winfield Scott's expedition to capture Mexico City, propelled him to presidency in 1848. His presidency was marked by his efforts to resolve the growing national tensions over slavery in the new territories acquired from Mexico. Key general, a successful victories. Okay. Actually, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Alright, I think we know a little bit about Winfield Scott now. But I'm still gonna look him up. Oh shit, I hit the mic, sorry. Oh. Mexican-American War. Okay. Winfield. Oh my gosh, I misspelled his name. Hold on, let me fix that. Winfield Scott. There we go. Winfield Scott was a U.S. commander during the Mexican-American War. Commander. So he was a general and he was a commander. Who led a successful amphibious landing at Veracruz, followed by an overland campaign to capture Mexico City in September 1847. A decisive act that effectively ended the war. His strategy brilliance included flanking a march at the Battle of Cerro Gordo, and a series of victories leading to the fall of Mexican capital. Okay, that's actually very interesting. So he's a commander. He led a successful amphibious landing. Campaigned to Mexico. Mexico's capital. Brought an end to the war. This man is like Andrew Jackson. Basically not giving a shit. Cause, state, division, and rights prolonged termed leading to the Civil War. So, due to these new territories, such as Texas, California, I believe New Mexico, Arizona, all these new territories gained from this war, and I believe the Louisiana Purchase, would all cause tensions between the South and the North, as the Missouri Compromise line, they wondered if it would continue on all the way to California, or if it just stopped there. They wondered if these other states would be implemented as a free state, or if they would be implemented as a slave state. Both South and North would try to basically one-up each other in making rules to implement them into their group, I guess. Each state would basically be implemented as either a free or slave state. And basically, one of them always tried to outdo the other. So, for an example, if there are 5 states that are free and 5 slave states, the South would try to create another state, such as Texas, and annex them into being a slave state. So now that there are 6 slave states and 5 free states, this would probably cause the other free states to annex California or another state into being the 6th, so that it is properly balanced. And sometimes it was the other way around, where the free states would try to one-up the slave states. Civil War. The Compromise of 1850 is a imaginary line drawn on a map similar to the Missouri Compromise that no slave states could be implemented above the Missouri Compromise line. The Compromise of 1850 would basically extend that line beyond the borders of the Compromise line. David Wilmot, a Democrat, would come up with the Wilmot Proviso, basically saying you cannot use you cannot use federal funds for slaves. This man basically tried to write into a bill, trying to be sneaky about it, that you basically can't do that. And if the South caught on and was basically like, dog, what's up? You talking shit? Trying to come after our stuff? Basically, that caused more tensions. John Calhoun, on the other hand, wanted California to enter as a slave state. Eventually, they would let the states decide on if they wanted to be free or if they wanted to be slaves. And California would, of course, choose to be free, but most people would actually run to go settle in California or these other states to quickly sway the vote in the opposite direction. President Zachary Taylor isn't a Southern sympathizer. Oh, excuse me, I read this wrong. Zachary Taylor isn't Taylor. Is it Taylor or Tyler? I don't know. Anyway, Zachary isn't Southern sympathetic. My goodness, I swear I can read. Zachary Taylor basically saw the entire United States as one whole union and didn't see it as a divided nation between South and North. He would be the first president to die in office. He got sick. Poor bastard. Henry Clay looked / urged for caution, basically with the state tensions with the free and the slave. Henry Clay would basically be like, yo dogs, we need to work something out because we're going down a path that might lead to a civil war. That's called foreshadowing. Daniel Webster argued for Northern views. Northern views are basically views of northern territories who basically really didn't need slavery due to their geographical location. They were more industrial, so the use of slavery was obsolete there during, before, and after the colonial war. When I say the colonial war, I mean the American Revolution. Stephen Douglas proposed a break bill where basically these bills necessarily be posted as one thing, but instead be divided into five bills. So we can see here I have the 5 bills. California is a free state. The middle viewed, liked it. The northern liked it. Texas boundary dip. The southern liked it, and so did the middle. New Mexico and Utah. Southern, middle, and north. Fugitive slave. That's supposed to say act. I don't know why I said land. I might have been thinking something while writing that down and it tripped me up. There we go. The south and the middle, like that. DC slave trade. Basically, this wanted to abolish slave trade in DC, and the South did not like that. The war, the Mexican War, would basically dissipate the Whig Party. The war Democrats would now become, due to the ideal of manifest destiny, would become the secession Democrats versus the Republicans. Another cause to the Civil War was political failures. It was littered with compromises. As I mentioned, they would introduce documents such as the Compromise of 1850 to basically fix mistakes of other documents, I guess, like the Missouri Compromise. Basically, after 1850, nobody wanted to compromise at all. They just wanted to live life and get shit done with. State rights. They wanted to be able to keep interests and be able to leave the Union. This ties back to the Virginia-Kentucky Resolution with James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, where they believed it was the states' rights to be able to secede if they chose to. Which, whenever we look at the Civil War, we realize that the Union believed that the Southern secession was an act of rebellion. Thus, why Confederates are known as rebels. Economics. The nation is divided for money investment. Due to the different geographical locations, one is more invested in trading, one is invested in trading goods, versus the other one is invested in trading crops. The South wasn't mainly focused on trading crops, but it was a main concept that was, I guess, in the South. Due to the agriculture of the South, it was mainly largely crops. which was more rocky, rough terrain for planting. So, the farmers would be basically a small minority. Culture differences during this time period. The Americans from the North and the South would basically believe stereotypes of each other. So they believed that the North wanted to get rid of their slaves and were basically attacking them at every turn possible. Whilst the North believed that the South all owned slaves and basically wanted to enslave people and basically wanted to dissipate from the Union. Slavery. John Brown, 1859. Bleeding, Kansas was a... So basically John Brown would basically bring a crisis in the South by doing two things. Number one, when Kansas was introduced into the United States, John Brown would move into Kansas and basically kill Southerners. He would kill Southerners. He tried to sway the vote to have Kansas as a free state. John Brown would later flee into hiding and would sit it out for a while. Later on, John Brown would want to start a slave uprising against the South, basically believing that he could go into the South, find a couple slaves, and those slaves would basically go to other farms and basically cause an uprising there, and they would go on and on and on, basically going on and on forever until an uprising was caused. This would cause fear in the South. But this would cause fear in the South with Southerners believing this idea of stereotypes of Northerners trying to remove slavery. John Brown's plan would ultimately fail, and he would be killed in a shootout with authorities. I don't believe John Brown ever really got a huge uprising. He had a small follower group, but very small. Most slaves feared that uprising against their master would face even worse punishment than if they didn't. So most chose not to. Outbreak. Lincoln is elected president. This would throw the South off edge, as Lincoln was a Republican and was basically, they would basically believe this stereotypical idea of the North in Lincoln, when Lincoln would continuously say that he would not take away their slaves. He just wanted to preserve the Union. When the states started to secede, Jefferson Davis was in charge of the Confederate States. Jefferson Davis was a very smart man, was your textbook guy that you would want. But in reality, he wasn't that good. The beginning of the outbreak of the Civil War would begin with Fort Sumter, which would be the ultimate cause of the Civil War, when Confederate soldiers would basically send a letter to Fort Sumter in the South, which was basically owned by, well, not owned, but guarded by the Union, and would tell them to surrender, but the Union chose not to surrender the fort. So the Confederates would open fire upon the fort. I believe they would kill about 13 to 30 people, or 40. But this would be the ultimate cause of the war, as newspapers fired off talking about the killing and the firing upon upon the Unionists in Fort Sumter. Fun fact, this would also become a battle cry that the Unionists would use during battle. Many Unionists, similar to the battle cry of Remember the Alamo, would do a battle cry for Remember Fort Sumter. Alright, I have reached the end of my notes. I have nothing left. I hope you enjoyed today's stream of my history 4642 001 War and American Society fall of 2025. I definitely enjoyed this study session, and I think I might do some more in the future, just because I like talking about history a lot, and it makes me feel like a professor. But that was the general gist of it. I hope to see you in another stream or another video. I want to clarify that I am not in any way an ASMR artist. I am absolutely garbage at this. I am a gamer and a full-time college student, and I'm a history major. That's why I basically do things related to history. But I hope you enjoyed today's stream, and I'll see you guys in another video, in another stream. Goodbye. Take care. Sweet dreams and have a good night. I'm gonna leave this here, and I'm just gonna do some mic brushing in the meantime. Nice. glance over my journal once again. But not right now. I'm talking about whenever I end this stream.